Amen. You can be seated.
Amen. Good morning. Welcome once again to Heartland Church. And if you guys don't mind, you guys look really good in all your Razorback gear. So can I just get a quick picture of you guys for our Razorback to School service? All right. Actually, I was getting a selfie that whole time. Well, welcome. Excited for our service today. This is one of my favorite services of the year just because it's fall and like football. There was actually college football on yesterday, not Razorbacks, but other teams. Notre Dame played. But all of our students are back from their summer exploits. Good to have you guys back. And, it's just great having so many family and friends here today. And we've already had a great time. We're going to continue to have a great time. I'm grateful just to be here with you guys every Sunday. Grateful for air conditioning. And if you didn't know, today it's a lot cooler outside, but don't be deceived. This is fake fall, okay? 2 weeks ago, it was really nice. That was fake fall number 1. This is fake fall number 2. Enjoy it for the 3 or 4 days, and it's going to be hot again. But, fall, it's my favorite season of the year for many reasons. The cool autumn air, the bonfires, the football games, the marching bands, right, Aaron, Carlos, come on. Busting out the jeans and the sweatshirts. For my wife and daughter, the craft shows and the pumpkin spice. That's not my favorite part. But hunting season, that's a big thing for me. And then the fall leads into Thanksgiving season. And the fall leads into the Christmas season, which are also some of my favorites. But, fall is just an amazing time. And fall is a time of homecoming, right? And so our lesson today is entitled Even Greater Homecoming. We've been doing this series all throughout the year called Even Greater Series. When Jesus left, he said to his disciples, he said, hey, you will do even greater things than what I've been doing. And so we've been talking all year about these different areas in our lives that God calls us to do even greater things. And today we're going to be talking about an even greater homecoming. You think about the high schools, the small towns, the colleges that have these homecomings. I mean, they plan, they make floats, they do parades, because homecoming is a special thing. Maybe you think about your own homecomings, when you get to go to grandma's house, when you get to go back to your mom's house. I saw Amanda post something about some food she wanted her mama to make, and just that homecoming, right? You get, whoa. Did you do that? Okay. Like shooting spitwads out. Even greater homecoming, you get to go home. It's such a warm feeling. And now maybe for you, that's not a warm feeling. Maybe you didn't have a great home life. Maybe you don't have anything to even go home to. The older I get, the less of those things that I remember in my childhood are still there in the way that they were. But today we're not talking about homecoming on campus. We're not talking about just going home to your mom's house. We're talking about an even greater homecoming. So if you have a Bible, look in Luke 15. We'll spend all of our time there today. If not, I'll have the scriptures up behind me. In Luke 15, verse 1, it says, now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them? Here you have Jesus hanging out, right? I mean, Jesus came to do some great things, and you thought, man, Jesus, he's going to do amazing things. But here he is hanging out with what most people considered the dregs of society, the tax collectors. Anybody would love to just get a call from the IRS today? No, right? Even today, like tax collectors is like, okay, I don't know about those guys. But these guys, they were really not good guys. The tax collectors in those days, I mean, they took advantage of people. They robbed them. They would take extra for themselves. So tax collectors, especially in those days, were just known to not be good people. And then it says, and the sinners. Man, he doesn't get too specific. It just says the sinners. Imagine being in that social group, right? You and your friends walk into a room like, oh, here comes the sinners. Here they come. I've been waiting for them, And it says that's who Jesus was hanging out with. And I just think about these quote-unquote sinners. They must have done something to have this reputation, right? I mean, we know we're all sinners, right? We say that, well, we all have sin, we're all sinners. But these guys were known as the sinners. Man, they must have done something bad. And you know, while we all sin, be honest with yourself. Are there certain sins to you that are kind of unforgivable sins? You know, well, yeah, we lie, or we maybe cheat a little bit over here, or we break the speed. You know, we all sin, right? But those sins, man, those are not forgivable. You think of something like adultery, someone who cheats on their spouse. And maybe you've seen that, or maybe you've been a victim of that. Maybe you've done that. And you think, man, who would do that? How could you cheat on your spouse? Maybe you've experienced that firsthand. You think about those that take advantage of people that can't help themselves. You know, I hear all the time. I was talking to a brother the other day, and he kind of got taken advantage of, an older brother, and people take advantage of the elderly. People take advantage of kids. People take advantage of people all the time, and maybe you think, you know what, that's just not right. That guy's a sinner. You think about things like pornography, violence, hatred, racism, sexism, drunkenness, drug abuse. You know, the list could go on, and maybe each one of us, there's certain things that we would never do that, right? And if we're honest with ourselves, we all have those at least inclinations, right? Maybe we don't live that way, but we have those inclinations. Or you think about something like murder. I can forgive anything, but not that. You know, taking the life of another person, taking that life away from their family and their friends. Man, you know, as a society, we can kind of put a label on the sinners at times. But what in your mind? What comes to your mind? The hardest thing for you to forgive? If I could forgive anybody unless they did that. That's where these guys were. They saw this group that Jesus was hanging out with, and they're like, hey, those guys are sinners. That's the dregs of society. Do you find that some people are worse sinners than the rest? But these are who Jesus hung out with. And then you have this other group of people there, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, criticizing Jesus for hanging out with the tax collectors and sinners. And I think what we're going to find is all of us, as we go through this story this morning, I think you're going to relate somewhere. Maybe you're going to relate in all the areas, right? But I think you're going to find yourself relating. And so Jesus goes on. He hears what they're saying about the tax collectors and the sinners. And he goes, let me tell you guys a couple parables. And he starts off with this parable about 100 sheep. And we're not going to read it all for time's sake, but he says, hey, there's 100 sheep, and 99 of them are good, but one of them wanders off, right? The lost sheep. You guys have heard that story before? And it says the shepherd leaves the 99 to go after the one. Just showing God's heart that, hey, man, my people, you guys are safe, but I got to go get the one that has wandered off from the flock. In fact, Jesus says there's more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over the 99 righteous people that didn't need to repent. Man, if you're that lost sheep, you repent. It says there is rejoicing in heaven. He goes on, he tells another parable about the lost coin. And it says this woman loses a valuable coin. You know, imagine you have a coin, I don't know, worth $20,000 and you lose it, right? You're going to find that coin. You're like doing everything, and that's what she did. She swept her house. She looked everywhere. She found the coin, and then she goes to her family and friends and says, hey, rejoice with me. I found that lost coin. And again, Jesus is talking about you. He's talking about me, how valuable we are to God, that, man, God is looking. He's searching the earth to find you, his valuable lost coin. And Jesus says there's rejoicing in the presence of the angels over one person who repents. Man, how cool is that when we repent, the angels rejoice. But then he goes on, and he tells this story, and this is perhaps the greatest homecoming of all time. Let's take a look in Luke 15 and verse 11. I don't know if we can tweak this sound a little bit. There's a lot of reverb coming through. Luke 15 and verse 11 says, Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his field to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. So Jesus starts telling this story, and he says there's two sons. And it sounds like these guys had a pretty good life, right? They're living with their father. I don't know how much he had, but he had enough for an inheritance, because the younger son asks for his share of the estate. Wow. Imagine going to your mom or your dad or your grandma or grandpa and saying, hey, I know you're still alive. I know you haven't died yet, but can I go ahead and get my inheritance now? Man, that's pretty brazen, right? Pretty insensitive. Kind of like saying, hey, I wish you were dead so I could just get what's coming to me. How unloving of this son to do that. And you know, the thing with this son is he thought he knew what he wanted. He thought, man, if I get that money, if I get what's coming to me, that is going to make me happy. Anybody ever been there? You see something and you think, man, if I just had that, then I'll be happy. Just that one more thing, that little bit nicer car, that bigger house, whatever it is, you know, that attracts us, thinking that will make us happy. What is it for you? If only I had ... then I'd be happy. Man, we've all been there. And so this son, he got what he wanted. Amazingly, the father's like, okay, here, have your inheritance. You know I would never go to my dad and ask that, and I know if I did, I would not have gotten it. But this dad is so loving and so caring for his son. He's like, okay, here, if this is going to make you happy, son, take your inheritance now. And it says he went off to a distant country and squandered all of his wealth in wild living. Man, he lived it up. I don't know how much he got, how much his inheritance was, but it says he just went wild. It was party time. But the party didn't last. He says severe famine hit, and he wasn't ready. You know, if only that son would have maybe saved a little bit of the inheritance, maybe he invested a little bit, maybe bought some land or bought some sheep or something like that. But he didn't do any of that. He just wanted that immediate gratification, living only in the moment. And then he began to be in need. And it says he hired himself out to feed pigs. Anybody here ever fed pigs? Pigs are not pleasant animals, right? They are just nasty animals. Sorry, all you Razorbacks right here. But you guys are just, you know. But you know, if you want to feed the pigs, you got to do something before you can feed the pigs. Anybody know what you got to do before you feed the pigs? You got to call the pigs, right? You got to call the hogs. And so we're going to put our story on pause just for a minute because we can't not call the hogs on Razorback to School service. But here's what I need. I need 4 college students, okay, that want to call the hogs. And I've got prizes, okay, for the top 2. So I need 4 college students to come up that can call the hog. Come on. Don't be shy. I'll call you if you don't come up. I need 2 more. I need 1 more. All right, give it up for our college students. Okay, so we're not going to do the whole thing because it's long, but each one of you is going to do it on your own, okay? So you're just going to do the last Woo Pig Suey and then the Razorback, okay? The last of the 3, you know what I'm saying? All right, you're like in the pep band, so why don't you go first, Aaron? All right, give it up for Aaron. Come on, Aaron. All right, here we go. All right. Next, here we go. Yeah. You're up. Oh, got the shimmy. All right, last one. Here we go. All right, now it's your time. By audience applause, we're going to see who won, okay? I'll put my hand over him. You say it. You give me your applause, all right? All right? I think it's close between these. So let's do these two one more time. All right, ready? I think Macy got you by just an inch. So for our winners, I have a flag to put on your car on game day, and I have a cooler. All right, give it up for our hog callers. All right, back to our story. Let's focus, all right, guys? Come on. This is church now, all right? Let's get serious. But yeah, he had to call the hogs, right? And you know what it says about this son? It says that he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating. And I don't know about you, that's pretty desperate, right? I've had some desperate times. I'm going to share in a second here, but to want to eat the pig slop is pretty desperate. You know, at one point in my life, I decided to set out for a distant country called California. I know there's a few people from California here today. So I loaded up my 70 Duster, my 70 Plymouth, right, with all my earthly belongings, all right? It wasn't my inheritance. It was just what I had, which was not much. And I set out for this distant land of California, and it was about a 30-hour drive from where I lived in St. Louis, okay? So 30 hours, I was going to break it up in a couple days, and I took some bank with me to make sure I was going to get there, okay? I had $250 to my name. Going to California, no credit card, right? $250, I'm going, with a 20-something-year-old car at the time. But I was going to get gas, I had, whatever I needed. So anyway, I set out, and my first leg of the journey was St. Louis there into Texas, okay? And I got all the way to this place called McLean, Texas. Anybody ever heard of McLean, Texas? It is middle of nowhere, right? It's about 11 o'clock at night. I'm driving, and all of a sudden the lights start dimming on my car. I'm like, uh-oh, this is not good. And the alternator was going out. And fortunately, I was able to get to the exit, but the auto parts store was closed. So now I'm stuck in McLean, Texas, 11 o'clock at night, nothing to do. Met some local kids, so I hung out with them for a while, and that was kind of fun. But then I just slept in my car. That's all I could do, because I didn't want to spend my $250. So next morning, I buy an alternator. That cost part of my $250. I fix the car, so it's running now. It's all good, and I take off. I get down to Amarillo, which is about 2 to 4 hours away, and I realize I left my tools on the curb. I was so excited that the car was fixed that I left my tools. And so now I'm just like, well, I'm just going to have to go. And I had inherited those tools from my grandpa. So those were not just any tools. They were special to me. So I keep going. And then I get to this place called Gallup, New Mexico. Okay, there's McLean to Gallup. Gallup, New Mexico. And my car starts kind of acting funny. Well, the fuel pump went out in Gallup, New Mexico. All I had was a pair of pliers left. And so I buy a fuel pump. I'm under there. I'm trying to do it with a pair of pliers. It's not working. I'm like, man, I'm going to have to get this fixed. So I go to the car repair place. It cost over $100 of my $250 I had to get the car fixed. And to make matters worse, the highway, I was on Route 66. The cross street in Gallup, New Mexico, anybody know what it is? It's Route 666. So I'm like, what's going on, And anyway, I got the car fixed. I found this cheap motel. Back then, you could get a motel in Gallup for about $25 a night. Met some Navajo that were about my age, so that was cool. We went to this bonfire out in the country. And anyway, I get back on the road. Now I'm going to California, right? My last leg of the journey. I make it, no more car troubles. But by the time I get to California, I had about $20 left to my name. Like, that is literally all I have. No backup plan. I ended up living on a mattress in a garage of a friend for about a month. The job that I moved there for this theater job. The company that I was going to work for ended up being total flakes. The job was a total bust. Now I'm in California, no job, no home, $20, nothing, right? I get this job selling art online. Don't ever take a job selling art online that's 100% commission. I worked there for a few days. I didn't sell one piece of art and didn't get any money. But all I could do, I survived on cheap canned goods, mostly beans, for several weeks. And my buddy was out there, so he lived in the garage with me in our friend's garage. We would go to Taco Bell, and we would get hot sauce packets and put it on our beans, because that was like a luxury, right? Man, we got flavor today. We finally get an apartment, but the hot water didn't work, and the stove didn't work. The hot water worked, but the stove didn't work, so we would heat our beans in the sink under the hot water. We just put the can of beans under there, run hot water on it, and we get it to like lukewarm beans. But then we didn't have a can opener, the kind you can twist, so we had a bottle opener. So we would have to go around the top of the can of beans, have a little star shape on it, to get to our beans. And all that to say, I've been pretty broke at times. I've been pretty down and out, living in a garage on a mattress, eating beans with Taco Bell hot sauce. But you know what I've never wanted to do? I've never wanted to eat the pig slop. I've never been that low, that down and out. But that's where this guy was. And so I've prepared some pig slop. So I need a couple more volunteers to... No, I'm just kidding. We won't do that. All right, let's read on, okay? I'll spare you guys. We've got some at the potluck afterwards. All right, Luke 15, verse 17. It says, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. Finally, he hit rock bottom. He humbled out. He came to his senses. He was starving to death. His attitude went from wanting to live it up, this wild life, to just wanting to live. He was willing to go and be a servant of his father, to be a servant of his family. I think sometimes God allows us to hit those points in our life. God gives us what we want, right? You want the inheritance? Okay, go do what you want to do. He doesn't stop us. But then he also allows us to hit rock bottom. He lets us set off for those distant lands. And many of us have been there. Many of us have hit rock bottom. Many of us have been humbled, or we've had to humble ourselves, right? And if you haven't, it's coming, right? We all get there at some point. But that's where he was at. And I would ask you this morning, what about you? What's your story? Where do you find yourself this morning? Have you wandered off from your heavenly Father? Maybe you've done some wild living. Maybe that's what you're looking forward to in college. Man, I'm ready. I'm out of the house. I am going off to this foreign land called Fayetteville, and I'm going to live it up. Or maybe you're on the road there now. Maybe you've hit rock bottom. Maybe you can even smell the pigs in the distance. There's times when I've looked at my life, I'm like, man, this smells bad. A few years after I became a Christian, I went through some challenges. I suffered the loss of my grandfather, who was one of my heroes, and I just didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know what to do with that, and so I tried to numb out, turn to drinking, turn to drugs, turn to immorality, turn to partying. I wanted to check out. In fact, when I went to California, it was during that time, and man, I didn't want to deal with reality. I didn't want to deal with life. I just wanted to have wild living, as it talks about in the story. And perhaps some of you can relate. But I want to tell you this morning, you don't have to hit rock bottom. You don't have to eat the pig slop anymore. Thankfully, the son in the story finally came to his senses. Not everybody does. Not every wandering son comes to their senses. But if you're hearing this morning and you're anywhere but right there with the Father, come to your senses. Look at this son. And as he headed home, I bet he had some questions. He's probably like, man, how's this going to go, right? You ever go into one of those conversations you're not really looking forward to? You're like, this isn't going to be pretty. And maybe he thought his father would be mad. Maybe he thought his father would disown him, shame him, scorn him. Maybe he thought, okay, I'm going to be a servant. I'm no longer going to be a son, but it's better than where I was. Well, let's see what happened. Look in Luke 15, verse 20. It says, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Wow. What an amazing homecoming. It says the father saw him while he was a long way off and was filled with compassion. You know, that's God's heart for each one of us. You know, the church I grew up in, it was kind of this, like, if you mess up, the lightning bolt's going to hit you, you know, and you kind of always just felt guilty. And I can even feel that way now at times. But that's not the Father's heart. It says he sees you coming a long way off, and he is filled with compassion. It says that he ran out, hugged him, and kissed him. Can you imagine running out, and there's a guy that's been living in the pig slop, and he's been traveling. So, I mean, I know he had to stink, right? But the father didn't care about the stink. The father ran, hugged him, kissed him, because he was coming home. He was getting his son back. Now, there is an important part of this thing as well, that the son was humble, right? The son was just like, hey, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. We got to be humble when we come back to God, right? He didn't come back to the father saying, all right, give me some more inheritance here. We got to be humble. But man, when we come humbly before God, it's like he brings out the best. He puts the best robe on us, kills the fattened calf, puts a ring on our finger. It is time to party when we come home to God. And this is God's desire for you. This is God's desire for me, to be there safe in the family. He doesn't care what kind of mess you made. He's like, hey, we'll clean you up. We got a robe. We got a ring. We got food. Just come home. What will it take for you, if you're wandering, to come to your senses and come home to your Father? You know, I hope that if that's you in any way, maybe you're not as far off as that guy was, maybe you're just a little off, but if that's you, if you've been wandering, I hope that today begins your homecoming. Amen? But then there was someone else in this story, and they weren't having it, right? Let's read on, and let's read about his older brother, because there were two brothers, remember? Verse 25 says, meanwhile, the older son was in the field. He's out working, right, to pay for that inheritance. It says, when he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never even gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you were always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Man, the older brother wasn't having it. He's out working in the field. He's out working hard on the straight and narrow, doing everything he was supposed to do while everybody else is getting a party. He was not happy. It reminds me of how the Pharisees and the teachers of the law looked at Jesus hanging out with the tax collectors and the sinners. His long-lost brother didn't deserve all this love and special treatment. He deserved it because he'd been the faithful one. You know, and I think we can look at this older brother and kind of be like, man, what a jerk, right? You should be happy your brother's home, but man, that was his attitude. And I think, you know, before we get too self-righteous about that brother, I say, well, hey, what about us? You know, those of us that would call ourselves Christians, disciples of Jesus, are we like that older brother at times? You know, remember I asked you, hey, what are those sins that you think are unforgivable? Or, man, that's worse. Those are worse sins. Murder, adultery, hatred, racism, violence. What is it that you just have a hard time letting go of? That's what this brother was going through. You know, and I would say, God forbid that we as Christians become like the older brother. I see it so often in our culture today. People are searching for God, right? They're in the pig slop. They need God. They want to return to the Father. But then they meet Christians that are like the older brother. You know, I meet people all the time that, well, I don't go to church anymore. I had a bad experience. I was treated this way. I didn't feel welcome. I didn't feel at home. You know, and I would say, is the church the welcoming, hugging, bringing out the best robe, putting a ring on their finger, killing the fattened calf place for them to come when they come home? You know, the other night, Crystal and I worked this concert at the Amp, and anybody ever heard of Jelly Roll? You know Jelly Roll, right? Maybe you don't. If Jelly Roll, we saw Jelly Roll, right? And he's a musician. He's a little bit country. He's a little bit rock and roll. He's a little bit hip hop. He kind of crosses all genres, right? And Jelly Roll is a little rough around the edges, right? I mean, you get what you get with this guy. He's been to prison, but he got out and he got this second chance in life. And he talks about God a lot in his songs. He knows where he's been. And you know, just listen to the words of one of his songs. It says, "These back roads got me. These pills pretend to be my friend. I'm done for the last time. I'm lying to myself again. I always say that. Now I'm on my way back here somehow. I should know by now. Mistakes I made, I paid for them in cash. Walked 1,000,000 miles on broken glass. I'm feeling like I'm fading. My heart's been slowly breaking. Might pop a pill and smoke and maybe drink. Talk to God and tell him what I think. At first, he's going to hate me, but eventually, he'll save me. I'm just a long-haired son of a sinner, searching for new ways I can get gone. I'm a pedal to the highway, if you ever wonder why we write these songs. Because I'm only one drink away from the devil. I'm only one call away from home. Yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle. I guess I'm just a little right and wrong." Man, he's just pouring out his heart about the things that he's been through. And you know, it was amazing when we were there at this concert. I look around, and as he's singing these words, thousands and thousands of people are singing it. And there's people crying. We met a woman that was a meth addict that's clean now, and his music helped her get there. And you know, I'm not saying doctrinally, whatever. I'm not worried about that. But this guy, he was connecting with people like Jesus connected with the people. And I think, man, people there were searching. Maybe they don't even know what they're searching for. We know what they're searching for. They're longing for a homecoming. Maybe that's you. Maybe that's me. Maybe really that's all of us in one sense, because we're all sinners. But you know, they connected. They connected with his words, and I think one of the reasons they connected, because he wasn't standing in judgment as the older brother. He was saying, come on in, come on home. So let me ask you, where do you see yourself in our story today? Where do you see yourself? Have you been wandering off in search of some distant country, looking for some wild living, wanting to get your inheritance? Man, that's going to make me happy. What will it take for you to come to your senses? What sort of pig slop are you going to have to go through before you say, man, it's time to return to my Father? Or perhaps you're that faithful brother. You've been here. I'm working hard. I'm out in the field. I'm working every day for Jesus. But I got my limits on the brothers that are out there wandering on what's forgivable and what's not. Or maybe you're like those servants in the household that the father said, hey, go get the best robe. Get the best ring. Let's kill the fattened calf. Maybe you're welcoming the lost sons and lost daughters in with open arms, giving a hug and a kiss to that long-lost brother. You know, the son, He made the choice to leave. He was responsible. He created his situation, but the Father welcomed him back with so much grace and so much mercy. And I would say if that's how the Father welcomed his Son back, that's how we got to be to the lost world around us. That when we have these encounters, when we get to spend time with people, when we get to reach out to people, that we are like the Father that welcomes them in. Even greater homecoming. I want to encourage you this morning, wherever you're at in your relationship with God, his desire is for you to be home. You haven't gone too far. Your sin doesn't stink too bad for him. He just wants you to come home. We're all a bunch of sinners just making our way home. Brothers and sisters, let's make this fall an even greater homecoming and let it start today. Thank you.